Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock and I'd like for us to get started. We have an exciting evening ahead of us. Just a few housekeeping things before we get started. If anyone should need the restrooms, they're down the hall right behind me on the right-hand side. And should we need to leave the building for any emergency, you may exit through the door where you entered, or there is an exit beyond the restrooms. So that's just for your information. I will hope you'll be sure and thank Miriam and Jack Cranford for arranging for refreshments for tonight and lemonade at the back if you get thirsty, and water. We appreciate that. And Joan Udy has been checking you in as you arrived, and Roger has been running around making pictures. So some of those pictures will appear on the Stanley County Historical Society's web page. That's historicstanley.org. And as Leon says, that's one word, Historic Stanley, and nothing in front of it, .org. So you can wait a little while before you look for these pictures, but they're pictures from our other events, and they're always posted right below the flyer for the event. Sometimes they're YouTube, sometimes they are just a series of pictures, but they will be there eventually. I have to send them to Louis, and he and I have to coordinate on that, so it takes a little while sometimes. As always, the Stanley County Historical Society is very pleased to see this nice crowd here tonight. In case you're wondering about this venue, and I think most of you have figured it out, this was once a radio station. And during the program tonight, I think you will hear a little more about this place in its radio days. We're excited to have 3 very familiar radio personalities with us tonight: Bob Harris, Matt Smith, and Leon Warren. All 3 are well known to radio listeners. Bob Harris began his broadcast career at WZKY in Albemarle, where he was sports director for 8 years. He went on to make his mark on sportscasting, becoming one of the most recognizable voices in this country. He served as sports director at WDNC in Durham for 24 years, and for 41 plus years, he was the voice of the Duke Blue Devils. Now, Chris said, don't add those up. He doesn't think that works. There must have been some overlap. During that time, Bob broadcast 471 consecutive Duke football games and 1,392 basketball games. He called 6 postseason football bowl games and broadcast 13 Final Fours, 11 NCAA basketball championship games, including all 5 of Duke's national title games. Bob was honored by the National Sports Media Association as North Carolina's Sportscaster of the Year 4 different times. Bob was inducted into the Stanley County Sports Hall of Fame in 1993, and then on May the 11th, 2006, he received what he says he considered his highest professional honor when he was inducted into the North Carolina Sports Hall of Fame. In 2010, he published his autobiography entitled How Sweet It Is, From the Cotton Mill to the Crow's Nest. And Bob has books available so you can see him after the event tonight. In 2016, Bob was awarded the Order of the Longleaf Pine by Governor Pat McCrory. In April of 2017, he was named the first honorary alumnus of Duke University's Alumni Association. Later this year, in December of 2017, Bob Harris will be honored as the Duke Legend at the ACC Football Championship game in Charlotte. Bob will take the mic tonight to reminisce about his long-running career and how it all started at WZKY in Albemarle. Matt Smith grew up in Albemarle. He listened to local radio every morning as he was getting ready for school. By the time he was a senior in high school, he had held part-time jobs at WZKY and WJRM in Troy. From these experiences, Matt knew that he wanted a career in radio. He attended North Carolina State, where he earned degrees in business and communication, setting his goal on radio ownership. While in college, he worked for some stations in the Raleigh area and continued to work at WZKY, WSPC, and WABZ during the summers. After graduation, he moved back to Albemarle to work at the local stations. When Bill Norman moved to the beach in 2000, Matt worked out a deal to buy the radio stations, which he did on April 1, 2004. Leon Warren began his radio career in the mid-70s, working at stations in Charlotte, Monroe, but primarily in Albemarle. Then from 1988 until 2000, Leon was the first director of the Stanley County Agri-Civic Center. In 1996, Leon was named the very first Stanley County Citizen of the Year, a much-deserved honor. In the year 2000, Leon returned to what he liked best, radio. And for the last 17 years, he has been the morning show host on WSPC 1010 AM and the news director for WSPC and AM Stereo 1580 WZKY. Leon keeps us all informed about the happenings in our area. It seems that Leon and his mic are every place. Even when I hear Matt say that Leon is on vacation, I still hear Leon on the radio. Leon and Matt, we thank you for all you do for our community and especially for your support of the Stanley County Historical Society and for all of the programs that we provide for the community. And now we're ready to turn the mic over to our broadcast trio.
I'm a little taller than Pat. Thank you, Pat, and the whole Historical Society and the museum, everybody. Pat came to us, and I couldn't remember, I was telling Bob, October, November time frame last year with this. So Pat's well informed and ahead of the game. So thank you all for putting this together. This has given us a chance to find out some things that I never knew about and I wouldn't have taken the time to find out about. So we'll share some of that with you. But first, we have myself and Leon, have two other of our radio station employees here tonight. Jim Smith. Jim, if you'll stand up. Jim does Sunday mornings, and he was actually, first time I walked in ZKY, he was there at the board doing an air shift, so Jim's still with us on a part-time basis. And David Kleiniff, Dave Andrews is his air name. If you listen to high school football on Friday nights, Dave's our play-by-play guy, and tonight he's our videographer, so thank you, Dave. And we didn't send out a company memo about blue shirts, but we're all wearing blue shirts tonight, so that was just happenstance. But no, thank you all for being here tonight. This is a wonderful crowd. I'm going to go over a lot of things. I've got a whole timeline to go through. I'm going to try and give Bob as much time as we can. So if I go over things too fast, please, I'm going to be here afterwards. We can go over some stuff if you want to afterwards. But I want to give time to Bob and to Leon, guys who are here, and let them tell their stories. And then I've got some pictures too afterwards on the slides that we'll show you. So if I can know how to work this. We start our timeline, something I didn't know about. On May 16th of 1940, the FCC actually rejects an application for a new station in Albemarle. I did not know that prior to WABZ-AM there was a station applied for, but C.L. Weathersby, W.H. Nichols, C.L. Pickler, and E.M. Thompson were on the application. The application was denied because the FCC deemed the group unable to construct and run the proposed station because of inexperience and financial ability. So that, just a fun little tidbit. Today the FCC doesn't look at those things, but as I read through that document, their whole financial history and background was in there, and they looked at that really hard in those days. Then, January 20th, 1947, the FCC grants application to construct WABZ on 10:10 a.m. G.H. Hendricks, Ira Lee, Carl C. Alley, and R.H. Whitlow. July 15th, 1947, 5:30 p.m. WABZ signs on 10:10 a.m. from the basement of the Albemarle Hotel, right down the street there. 5:30 p.m. they signed on within, I think it was within an hour of them getting the telegram from the FCC that the license was granted. And then the next day was their first full broadcast day on the 16th. March 10th, 1949, WABZ was sold. W.E. Smith, T.R. Wolf, and M.M. Palmer. And then December 4th, 1952, sold again. W.J. Page, Staten P. Williams, E. Keith Allman, Grace W. Kennard, and J.O. Ivester. And then, July 9th, 1956, another station enters the scene. WZKY 1580 signs on from new studios on Magnolia Street. The owners were, many of you know, Jake Presson, who he was, also H.E. Payne and Mrs. Lottie P. Killam, doing business at Stanley County Broadcasting Company. 1957, I don't have the exact date, but Woody Durham works at WZKY during that time frame. I had a picture, but I turned the place upside down. I could not find it, of Woody in 1957 sitting at the controls of WZKY. It's a great picture, but I could not find it. If I ever find it, I'm going to put it on our Facebook page. But I did want to say, a few words about Woody. Woody has gone on, of course, to some wonderful things. 40-year voice of the North Carolina Tar Heels, and many accomplishments. We do wish Woody could be here with us tonight. Of course, he could not. Some of you know that he's having trouble speaking these days and is not doing any public engagements. We did try to contact Woody through several different venues. Leon?
We got something late. If you want a mailing address for Woody, if you want to send him a card or a letter, I got several copies here of his mailing address. I didn't get this till like half an hour ago. So feel free to take one of these if you want to send Woody a card or a letter, or if they all get gone, if you'll contact me or Matt at the station, we'll give you his mailing address if you'd like to send Woody a card or a letter.
Thank you, Leon. Yeah, we've been trying to get a hold of Woody and get some contact information for him. We've always gotten a hold of him through the network prior, but since he retired, that's become more difficult. But thank you, Leon. We did get that information, so if you want to send him a card or a letter, there it is. And a little bit more about Woody later on as well. 1958, WABZ signs on at 100.9 FM and brings on the FM station. So that was a big boost. Let's see. October 1959, WZKY is sold to Suburban Radio Group. November of 1966, WABZ AM and FM moved to studios at 108 East North Street, where we're sitting right now. In 1967, Bob Harris joins WZKY. Now this next slide, there's a lot of stuff that Pat said, so we're trying to squeeze some stuff in, so I won't duplicate all of that, but a lot of accomplishments from Bob. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Harris.
I'll lower it a little bit, Pat. Well, first of all, I did not begin my sports career the first year that WABC was on the air. It just seems like it at times. But it's really great to be here. There are a couple of things that I want to talk to you a little bit about. 1957 was a great year. I was a sophomore in high school, and there were two things that happened during that calendar year. Does anybody remember what they might have been? Sir? And won the Western North Carolina Football Championship, and Dick was a very prominent part of that win.
Stanley County Centennial.
Stanley County Centennial, you are right. This is the hat I wore in the parades, right down 2nd Street and all around. and it still fits, which shows you that I don't have the big head. Well, I was almost 14 years old when Jake Presson and family put WZKY on the air, and he went over to WABZ and absconded with Nielsen Russell, and he came over for the AM show. Now, I remember a lot about Nielsen, or as he was known on the air, Fat Boy. But he, one of the things you always heard in the mornings when he put that morning show on was, "This is the old goat head sitting on the nail keg over here on Milky Branch." It was Milkier Branch over there off of the highway the road that goes in. He went back to WABZ and did sports for them. He did their play-by-play for a long, long time. Sometimes we were doing the same game. Other times it was him broadcasting on WABZ. One thing that I do remember, and I hope I'm not going to embarrass anybody, but there was a very close game, and one of the Albemarle players broke out around the right-hand side and headed up the sidelines for what was going to be an obvious touchdown. And in his excitement, he took the microphone, which he always held in his hand, and as he said something, he slung his hand out like this, threw the microphone out the window, down from the second floor of the old high school, which is the Central Elementary School now, which is where you had to broadcast from. And all you could hear on the radio was, he was pulling that thing back up into the booth. A lot of people didn't know this, but he was a graduate of North Carolina State College at that time. A lot of us in here had a relationship with NC State College. But some really good voices on both radio stations. I remember Marvin Coley, who in addition to being one of the top salesmen for WABZ, was in a quartet here in Stanley County, and my cousin Madge Harris played piano for that group. We have a distinct honor here tonight, and I'm so glad to see three young ladies in our audience, because WABZ signed and had in their stable of really good announcers the first African American to go on the air in Stanley County, D.D. Snuggs. I would like for his three daughters to stand up, please. History in the making. That was great. Lee Kynard, who later went on to WFNY in Greensboro, was the program director. J.D. Brooks was the engineer. And as I mentioned, they carried the high school football games on Friday nights live, which nobody else could do because they had an FM station. But they only ran that FM station on Friday nights to get the broadcast on the air. Now, I came back to Albemarle from a long career of about 4 years with Goodyear, and started selling insurance for a friend of mine here in Stanley County. And I ran into Ralph Gardner, who was the manager of WZKY at that time. Ran into him down here beside of the First National Bank. We were talking. This was in early August. And the sports term came up, and I asked him if he was going to carry the high school broadcast that fall. He said no, he didn't have anybody to do it. The man that had been broadcasting the games by delayed tape had gotten a promotion with his company. He was just a freelance play-by-play man, and he said that he didn't have anybody to broadcast, so he's not going to be able to. And I don't know why the good Lord put these words in my mouth, but I said, just blurted it out, I'll do them for you. I had been in front of a microphone 3 times in my life. I did the PA for Albemarle boys basketball my senior year. Right, Gary? Where are you, Willie? I see you. Okay. And 2 summers for the Youth Week. I was the Youth Week pastor 2 years in running for my church. That was my experience. Ralph didn't know that, and he didn't care. But I did tell him that that was it. That was my experience. So I quit. I went ahead and started doing the games that late October. About midway of the year, my district manager from the insurance company in Concord came down to the office and read me the riot act, because it seems that the contract I had with the insurance company did not allow for me to accept any outside remuneration. In other words, I couldn't get paid to do anything else except sell insurance. But they told me they would let me finish the season. I did. It was down in the county down below us. Anson County. Yeah, I think it was Anson High. Anyway, when I was wrapping up the big old tape recorder and the microphone, I had tears in my eyes, because I thought that was going to be the last play-by-play I would ever get to do. But I ran into Ralph again, and we talked about going on full-time with WZKY. And he said he was probably going to have to wait till sometime in the early summer the next year, because radio sales kind of fell off after Christmas, so they wanted to wait till it gets back. Anyway, Ralph became the president of the Chamber of Commerce, and he said, "Bob, I need you to take over a radio slot on the air and do some sales, and we're going to reinstitute sports. We're going to start with baseball." I said, "Okay, we can do that." So I got the live equipment, drove up to Asheboro, which was the first baseball game for Albemarle that year, plugged it in, did my broadcast, went back down to Albemarle, and we had two-way radios in our car at that time, and mine was just chattering when I got within range, and it was Hillbilly John who was running the board. And I acknowledged him, and he said, "Where in the world have you been?" I said, "I've been in Asheboro doing a ball game." "No, you haven't either. We've had to play music all afternoon." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "How did you hook up that broadcast equipment?" I told him. He said, "Well, that should have been right. Did you call the telephone company and tell them to activate it?" "For what?" That was my first live almost experience. He made me a salesman too. That's where I could make a good bit more of my money, which was about $78 a week. But my first month selling advertising, I sold $56 worth of advertising. I got 10% of that. But during the 8 years I was there, the last 5, I was the top salesman for the station, and it was a good thing that I was able to do that. We changed some things around as far as that went. Most stations were getting $1.50 per spot. For the football and basketball and baseball games, I was getting $50 per spot. So we were making some money, and that was the name of the game. Now, Ralph Gardner was a super manager. I really enjoyed working for him. He was an employee's manager. He helped me out with so much, and we just had a great time with he and Hillbilly John and the late Roger Smith, who was our morning man at that time, and David Laughlin, who did the afternoons. We had a bunch of weekend interns that really made everybody's job a whole lot easier. Ralph's wife, though, almost made my career very hard, or maybe non-existent. I was reading the afternoon sports on the air, and she comes into the room. I'm sitting there, the microphone is this way. I'm sitting here doing it like this, and I see her out of the corner of my eye. I knew she smoked, but I did not know that she had a lighter in her hand. She lit up my sports copy. And I think when it got to one point, I said, "And folks, that's the latest of the news. from sports, and I dropped it because it was burning up and burning my fingers. I was fired at WZKY one time. We had some issues, and the ownership from Belmont and up in the mountains came down. And we had a, as they say, come to Jesus meeting, I guess would be the best way to put it, because they laid it on the line. And unfortunately for Ralph, he was terminated that afternoon. And at that point, Hillbilly John turned around and said, "I'm leaving." Walked away. David Laughlin said, "I'm gone too." Roger Smith said, "Well, I'm going to be gone myself." I looked around, I said, "I'm not staying here as the only guy on it." So I was fired. Well, after everything kind of settled down, the president of the company said, "I want to talk to each one of you individually." So on my little interview with him, he looked at me and he said, "I really like people who stand up for what they think is the best thing to do. You were misled on some things, but you stood your ground. You got your job back if you want it." I said, "Yes, I do." A little while later, we had a change in managers, and they invited me to go to work for the station in Concord. So I drove up there, getting to the station at about 4 o'clock every morning, Monday through Friday, and did my AM stick and a little bit on the FM. And that lasted for about 24 hours, and I didn't like that at all. Too much driving, too early. So they asked me if I would finish out the month so they could get somebody else in there. And I went back to Albemarle, where I settled in, and we broadcast high school football games, boys and girls basketball, high school baseball, Pfeiffer College some basketball, and a lot of baseball. We did Little League baseball. We did slow pitch softball. I covered the PGA golf tournament in Charlotte. I covered the Greensboro Open. I covered the 1974 PGA Championship in Tanglewood the day that Nixon resigned. And one thing that I'll always really kind of cherish, I got to bat down at Rock Creek Park against the King, Eddie Feiner. And everybody talked about how great he was. There was him and 3 other guys, a catcher, a first baseman, and a utility player. In his career, he had 141,517 strikeouts. Actually, I thought it should have been 516 because that third pitch was low. I didn't see it, so I couldn't swing at it. I covered the Carolina Cougars almost every game in Charlotte. One year they had a media team against the NASCAR guys, the drivers. And they invited me to come from Albemarle over to Charlotte and play on the media team, which I did. I sat on the bench for most of the first half and did get in a little bit in the second half. And I got a breakaway. Down the floor I go for an easy lay-in, and all of a sudden from behind me, whap! David Pearson knocked me down. Thankfully, the referee was following the play, and he called the foul on David. I got 2 free throws, made them both. I was 2 for 2, so that was good. But as I said, we had a lot of great announcers at WZKY at that time, and I miss John and Roger, and don't get to see David very much, and some of the others that we had, and it was a great time. Sunday mornings, I worked that shift a couple of times when the people who normally had the shift couldn't make it. But Sunday mornings was all religious. The preachers came in at 8 o'clock, and they went till 11, and then from 11 to 12, we had live remotes from different churches here in the county. And one Sunday, I wasn't on duty, but I was told that one lady really got filled with the gospel and went shouting. Scared a lot of people. Scared the preacher most because she started taking her clothes off. He said she got about 3 buttons off that shirt unbuttoned, and I grabbed her and hugged her. And that kept her from getting any more of mine. Lots of great things. I even had my family come over to the radio station one night. We spent the night there because it was going to snow that night. And I didn't want to be late for my shift, so I was going to be there if I had to run the whole thing the whole day. But that was just the kind of radio station WZKY was. A great, great opportunity for me. And it did a great thing for me because it launched me into a situation in Durham to be able to work for a very nice station there, WDNC. I was a salesman to begin with. First week I was there, they told me that they were going to put me on the air on Sunday night doing a 1-hour call-in sports talk show. I had never done a call-in show of any kind in the 8 years here. I had never done a sports show. But he brought in a guy that had done some newspaper there in Durham, and he helped me through that first year, and we went on for a number of years. And 42 years in Durham gave me some of the greatest moments in my life. And I thank so many people, a lot of you here in this room, for making me feel good about myself and boosting me to boost my career and move on to some great things. I retired this past April after 41 years of doing play-by-play for football and basketball. I know I'm going to miss it, but I'm not going to miss the long travel, the late night returns. We had 3 games this year that we got back home after playing on the road, and I got into bed at 6:30 a.m. And when you're 50, when you're 63, 64 years old, that doesn't work real well. But it was a great experience, and I really thank all of you who are in this audience tonight for your friendship, your help, whether it was in elementary school, Little League baseball, slow pitch softball, high school, college, while I was at WZKY here. But thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I hope we'll have time for maybe some questions and answers later. Okay? Thank you so much.
I also want to say a special thank you to Bob. Bob, out of everybody I know from Stanley County who's gone on to make it big and bigger and better things, Bob is the one guy that's come back every single time he's asked. He's always cared about Stanley County, always asks, and is always real quick to respond to anything we've ever asked him for. So for that is a true treasure, and thank you, Bob, for that. Just a couple more things. We're going to go through this timeline again pretty quick, and then we'll hear from Leon in a minute. One thing that stood out here, this is an interesting picture, an interesting article. March 25th, 1969, WABZ receives the North Carolina Education Association School Bell Award, which is a great honor in itself. But the reason I wanted to show you this picture, many people of you will know. Anybody know who that is? Bob Richards. And then Ramel Varner. Oh, wonderful. Okay. And you know who that is? Toby Webb. He was the superintendent of the schools at the time, or the Albemarle schools. So anyway, I thought that was an interesting picture to bring those together, and thought many of you would know who those folks are. So that was an accomplishment WABZ was very proud of at the time. And many of you may not know this, but the WSPC call letters were originally Pfeiffer University. We serve Pfeiffer College. Now, if anybody will come up to me after the program, if you know, because I could not find in all the research the years that it was on the air. I'm thinking 60s or 70s. But I did have Bill Norman, our former owner, was an alumni. He worked at the station while he was at Pfeiffer, and he saved this letterhead. So this is what I could find for the WSPC at Pfeiffer. Now, Bob didn't mention this. I thought he might, but in 1972, WZKY was named the top non-metro sports station in North Carolina, large part thanks to what Bob was doing at the time. So that was a great honor for WZKY in those days. November 10th, 1979, WABZ AM 1010 changes call letters to WWWX, which is what many people remember being in this building as the AM. Now, in the 1970s, sometime, there was a red letter date that Leon Warren joined WABZ and WWWX. Leon and I put our heads together. We couldn't figure out what day that was, so we just put a big question mark there. 1980, WZKY is purchased by Bill and Susie Norman. 1984, WZKY quadruples power to 1,000 watts. And February 19th, 1986, WZKY becomes one of the first stations in the U.S. to broadcast AM stereo, which we still do to this day. By the way, interesting fact, in the quadrupling of the power, if I read it correctly, Jake Presson was the one that came back and threw the switch when they went up to 1,000 watts. November 12th, 1986, WABZ and 3WX sold to Stanley County Communications, William C. Boyce Jr., Brenda Boyce, James R. Willis, and William E. Self. That didn't last too long. June 21st, 1988, WABZ sold to Charlie Hicks. He was the owner of WEGO in Concord at the time. And something I didn't know until I was doing research for this, his plan was to actually move the tower for WABZ out to Millingport and put up a 500-foot tower, which is twice as tall as the tower we have now, and make WABZ a station that would serve Stanley and Cabarrus counties. But those plans never materialized, but they led to the FM actually being moved over to Charlotte, which we'll cover a little bit in a few minutes. February 15th, 1990, 1010 changes call letters to WXLX. In my opinion, some of the worst call letters a radio station could have, but shortly after, November 1990, 1010, WXLX goes dark as the FM is sold to new owners. March 93, WXLX 1010, purchased by Bill and Susie Norman, begins simulcasting WZKY. Also at that time, those two stations began 24-hour broadcasting with computer automation. If I can keep my slides together. And an interesting story, that was about the time that I was working Sunday afternoons at WZKY. Bill Norman would work the mornings and I would come in after church and relieve him and play him until sign off at the time. But when he got the computer, he'd just flip the computer on and go all night. But about the time he installed the computer was about the time I had to go back to college. So I said, who's coming in to replace me? He said, well, nobody. And I said, so I'm being replaced by a computer? He didn't think that was too funny, but that's what happened. January 1st, 1994, WABZ-FM, purchased by Bill and Susie Norman. In 1994, WXLX changes call letters to WSPC and begins separate programming from WZKY. In 1988, WABZ-FM sold to Susquehanna Broadcasting, but continues to be operated by the Normans. Susquehanna's plan was to upgrade the power and move it over to Charlotte. Year 2000, Leon Warren returns to the air as morning show host and news director for WSPC-WZKY. 2001-2002, we had the great honor of having Bob Harris return to WZKY to broadcast the play-by-play for the Albemarle High School state championship games those years. And I will tell you, I was the equipment guy for that. And when we walked up there and we got everything set up, and then Bob Harris walks in the booth, everybody up there was like, oh my goodness, what is he doing here? And to know that he came to broadcast a high school football game, everybody was stunned in the booth up there, but we were proud to have Bob, and that was one of those things he did for the people of Stanley County that I mentioned. So thank you, Bob, again for that. April 1st, 2004, me and my wife, we purchased WSPC-WZKY. November of that year, WABZ-FM is sold to Radio 1, and they moved it over to Indian Trail. So November was the last time WABZ-FM broadcast in Stanley County. 2006, WSPC and WZKY began worldwide streaming online. We've had a couple of interesting things happen because of that. We had, when the Iraq War was going on, we received word from some military men serving in Iraq. And they told us they were able to listen to their sons play high school football in Iraq. And that was, yes, that was a fabulous thing. And some of you know Dick Storm used to do ads on our station. Well, he had a friend that didn't know he was in Albemarle, did not know he was on the radio. But this friend of his knew him from 20 plus years ago, lived in Spain. And this guy was cruising online and was liked listening to our station and heard Dick on the radio doing his ads and got in touch with him after 20 years. And so that was an interesting story. But we've heard from all kinds of places with our streaming. 2012, WSPC and WZKY go mobile, and we have custom mobile apps for Android and Apple devices. This past December, we did a major sound upgrade and got digital audio processing for some of the best sound available on your AM dial, so that was a big boost for us. Now this next point is something that we don't have anything to do with. Johnny Almond got licensed for what's called the LPFM, Low Power FM Station, and he actually was able to pick up the WABZ call letters, and he's running a small station at 101.5 FM. He's got enough power to cover, I think, most of the city of Albemarle. I haven't seen his coverage map, but and he's not doing a whole lot with it yet. I contacted him. He told me a little bit, but didn't really give me a lot of his plans. So that was just something we thought we'd mention since he's brought the WABZ call letters back here. So Pat mentioned some of this. I'm going to turn it over to Leon here in a minute, but Leon has decades, again, we couldn't put a number on it, covering Stanley County news on the radio. Pat said I grew up listening to the radio. I grew up listening to Leon's news on the radio, and to be able to work with him now is just such an honor. But I remember him working in this building and listening to him on the radio. Stanley County's very first Citizen of the Year, the first director of the Stanley County Agri-Civic Center, and our current morning show host and news director for WSPC and WZKY, Leon Warren.
I got stuff. Now, y'all know I can talk, so we'll try to, I got a clock here. You may have to cut me off, and that's fine. I want to start because I worked here in this building, and some of you remember because it used to be the old Home Savings Bank building, and I think they built it, and then they moved down the road there, and of course they've left that now. It's going to be the new City of Albemarle Police Department headquarters building soon. But just before I forget, this was an office where usually the people that did the logs stuff worked, and back there about where Chris Bramlett is at was a big desk type thing that I think they had left over from the bank, and the radio station kept it. But when you walked in on the right, when I first started, Ruby Cooper was there, and it looked like a teller's desk, and she was a receptionist and answered the phone. And later on, one of the people that worked there was Elizabeth Thomas, who's since been married, but Larry Thomas's sister, Larry and Judy Thomas. And then you'd come down a hallway here, and then there'd be some plywood offices, and mine would be like right here, and there would be another one, and there'd be another one. There'd be a space. Even when I first got here, and this, I'm not telling you anything, if you go to this church you don't know, the roof at times has been bad. I hope you've got it fixed. First day I came in, there was a bucket in the back hallway, and it was raining, and it was going into the bucket. So anyway, they've added the But anyway, there used to be storage up, and I haven't been in this building in years, but there used to be storage upstairs, and some of the stuff that you didn't want to throw away, but you didn't really use, you go back down the hall, and these stairs would come down, and you'd go up and store it up there in the storage. Bank vault leftover, we had a salesperson named Ella that we put in there. You would walk in and ask Ella one thing, and in 15 seconds she had changed the subject to something that was non-business related. And you couldn't get her off of it. And she would start one thing and then go to another. She never really got anything fixed, and the bosses often come back and say, we really need something. Teletype machine used to be here in the olden days, and Bob remembers this. A lot of people would get stuff off of teletype, AP, UPI, we had API, AP, Associated Press, and UPI, United Press International, and it was in a room and with a glass window, and you'd open it up, and every 3 or 5 days you'd have to change the ribbon, because the ribbon would go out and be on a spool like this. It'd be a black spool, and the ribbon would go out, so you have to go in and change the ribbon, and then you usually put a box of paper in there that's about that tall, and it would run, and every now and then you have to change the paper. But teletype ran 24/7, 365. About where Calvin is at is sort of where the FM station was at, and I'll later on tell you about the AM. But it was sort of like this, and you faced that way, and there was records along this wall and records along that wall, but you could see out if you were sitting at the console, about where Marvin's at now, sitting at the console for the FM, you could see out the door. And then there were other things along the side. And later when we split off, and I'll tell you about that, what was WABZ AM, later became 3WX, was over here. And it started out mostly as a preacher's. The preachers would come in on Saturdays and Sundays or whenever, and they'd do their thing there, but the studio wasn't used much till we split off, and again, I'll tell you about that. The manager's office was back where Jack and Miriam were, and it was sort of that way, and they would be sitting like this with the window. They had a great view of the downtown. So that's kind of what that looked like, and it's been changed since, which is fine. Want to start and remember, first I want to thank Bob, and you know, you can't say enough good things about Bob, can you?
No.
He's had so many accolades, but one of the two things that I will mention, and he's going to be inducted, I think, in this December. He is the only non-player ever to be named an ACC Atlantic Coast Conference legend. 41 years, he's the longest tenured broadcaster consecutively at any college in the ACC and one in the nation. So two things in particular about Bob, and just a great guy. Jim Smith, who's back there, who introduced. Jim looks young, but how long have you worked at the station or for Bill Norman? About 20, 25 years?
1986.
Okay. Jim's been there a long time. Good weekend people are hard to find. Jim also produces the football games, which is whoever's doing the football game. Jim runs the commercials, helps get them on the air, helps keep them on the air if there's trouble and stuff. And Jim works Saturdays for us when he can. But Jim's been a great asset to the station for a quarter of a century, working on weekends and working sometimes on vacation and helping us out. Same thing with Dave Pius doing the football game. Now, I will tell you, I admire people that do sports because I can. Sports broadcasting is one of the hardest things to do on radio and TV because you're sitting there watching this and you're trying to describe it. And there's people yelling at you, yelling behind you, to the side of you, the front of you. Sometimes you can't see, sometimes it's raining. The referee gets in the way, it's muddy, you can't read the numbers. But sports broadcasting, to do it right like Bob does and Dave does, is really hard, whether it's high school football or college or whatever. While I'm on Bob, I want to mention Bob's wife. Is Phyllis here?
No. Okay. She and Clive's wife are.
Okay. Bob way over married, and he knows that. And you're talking about great wives. Phyllis has done so much for Bob, and Bob knows about it. And Phyllis has probably done stuff for Bob that he's not aware of it. But last year, at the end of the Duke football season, head coach David Cutcliffe gave Bob an honorary 41 jersey for his 41 years Duke football. And I thought that was a class act. And Phyllis put together this sort of secret Bob Harris Day, which he may have had an inkling of, but really didn't know about it. And I think he got the Order of the Longleaf Pine then from the governor. But Bob is just a great guy. Okay, I want to mention, now Gareth Smith's sitting back there. You may say, well, Gareth is retired from the phone company. Gareth surely did not have anything to do with the radio station. I will tell you that Gareth was one of the most important people to the radio station here and on Magnolia. Still, our line that goes to the transmitter goes by telephone. And many times, Gareth would come not only here, but to Magnolia, and I'm sure he helped other people out. Gareth was one of the best service technicians the Concord Telephone Company ever had, because he knew what he was doing. He would get there, he would get the problem fixed as soon as possible, and he was a nice man. But many years, not only ABZ, but ZKY and any radio station, you had to use telephone lines, and for different things. Sometimes the sports would be done on telephone lines. So telephone lines were very important to us, and we owe Gareth a great note of thanks for that. I don't think Dick Norwood is here. Are you, Dick? If you are, speak up. Dick lives in Albemarle, and Dick at one time had worked for the Suburban Radio Group, and he came to Albemarle before Bill Norman, and he was the manager of WZKY. And Dick was a broadcast veteran. Dick, again, cannot say enough about. General manager there, sales manager in sales, did air work. Very nice man. Dick's still here living, and I still see him from time to time in Albemarle with his wife Barbara, who worked for many years at Belt. But I want to mention Dick. I'm glad that Dee Dee Snuggs' daughters came. Dee Dee had this, and most of you are too young to remember. Dee Dee had this great voice. If you heard Dee Dee Snuggs on the air and you did not know what he looked like, you would not think he was African American or anything. He had this very deep, very profound announcer type voice back in the 40s and 50s, when you had announcer type voices. When you get up in the mire, they gave up and they just said, but Dee Dee Snuggs had this great voice, and Dee Dee was one of the leading examples of African American men in Albemarle, and I think was a great inspiration to many people in that area of the town. Dee Dee was the first African American policeman. He worked at the police department. He worked at the radio station on holidays, nights, weekends, vacation. Dee Dee, I think, had other jobs. One of the things I most admire about Dee Dee was he went back to Pfeiffer University in Meisenheimer and got his degree when he was, let's say, middle-aged or more. But Dee Dee was just a great guy. A big man. I will tell you, you would not argue with Dee Dee Snuggs. It was this tall and about this wide, and it was all muscle. Dee Dee could have been a football player, but Dee Dee Snuggs was just a great guy. I'm glad Linda Richards is here. I fondly remember Bob. Bob was so nice to me. And Bob, for many years, as you probably know, Bob's father ran the hotel over here. While I'm there, I do things by association, it's easier to remember. We wanted to get y'all into the hotel basement where the radio station started. And we tried, and Roger Dick and Nicole Williams were so nice to us, but you just can't get in there. There's steps from the outside, and the last time I was in there was 10 years ago, and I'm sure if we got in, it's very decrepit, it's probably very dirty, but we tried to get a tour made of that, and it's just not going to happen. So anyway, ABZ would move from there to here, and at one time too, they went to the old, I guess I still call it the Whitley Realty Building, where David Bieber's office is, across from the First Baptist Church, from the First Lutheran Church, near the Home Savings Bank, and they were on the second floor there before Bill moved them out to Magnolia. Want to mention Woody, and we very much wanted Woody to be here. We love Bob, but when people, and especially when I first came to Stanley County, it was Bob and Woody, Woody and Bob. You could not say one without the other. But just to hit on a few quick things about Woody: 40 years, voice of the North Carolina Tar Heels football and men's basketball programs, 1,800 radio games. He retired in 2011. Selected North Carolina sportscaster many years. Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. Honored him with the Kurt Gowdy Award for Electronic Media. He's in the North Carolina Stanley County Sports Hall of Fame, and as I mentioned, his address is over there, and I know Woody would appreciate if you dropped him a line, if nothing else, just to say thank you, and we're thinking about you, and wish you well, and that type of thing. Let's go. Bill and Susie Norman. You may not know the history of Bill and Susie, but Bill grew up in the Winston-Salem area, maybe Yadkin County, but he met Susie at Pfeiffer. Susie is from Montgomery County, and her father, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, some of you know more about this than I do. Her father was John Wallace, who was a prominent banker in Montgomery County with First Bank or whatever, and at one time either started the radio station over there or owned it, and eventually at one time Bill and Susie bought it from him. But Susie and Bill met at Pfeiffer, fell in love, and of course got married, and that's where the Bill and Susie story goes. Roger Smith that he brought up. Roger also worked at ABZ, when I was here, and I thought it was the sweetest thing. And as I got to thinking about it this week, and I got kind of emotional because I think about Bob and Phyllis, and of course, most of y'all are happily married, and the ones that aren't, I guess, won't admit it. But Roger would often relieve me because I get off at 3 in the afternoon, and Roger and Patsy would come in, and Roger and Patsy would work from 3 to 10, and that's when they signed off. And just so you'll know, and Matt can help me out better. If you got an FM station, you have to operate it at least from 6 in the morning to 10 at night, I think. But a lot of stations go longer. But that was the minimum. If you had an FM station, the FCC said, you got to be on from 6 to 10, period. Well, Roger worked 3 to 10. And Patsy came in with him. And they would come in, and Roger would get great voice, very nice man. And Patsy was his wife. And they would come in, and they would work from 3 to 10. Now, Roger did the board and stuff, and Patsy may have run the board or did some stuff when Roger went to the bathroom or whatever. But they would bring their supper with them, and they would always have tea and stuff. But Roger and Patsy were there, and especially after 5 o'clock, you lock the doors, there's nobody coming by, there's no phones much. And they loved each other, and they enjoyed being at the radio station. And the thing was, I'm not going where you think I'm going. Roger and Patsy really liked that job, and you got to admit it. You're working in an air-conditioned building, you play records, you play good music, you might be at home playing music, but here you're playing records and you get paid for it. And Roger, we did block programming, and I'll try to get to that too. And at night, Roger would play like the good music, or some people call it be like orchestras, like Jackie Gleason Orchestra, Frank Shacksfield, that beautiful music, the big lush sound, and the vocals like Peggy Lee and Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra and stuff. But it was the sweetest thing. They would come in, they enjoyed being together. Patsy would help Roger out. She'd pull news from the teletype. She'd answer the phone. But I always thought that was so sweet that they would come in together, and they had a good time here, and they enjoyed it and had a great life. And that's one thing I want to mention about Roger and Patsy is they were great people, and I enjoyed working with them. Ramel Varner, as Matt mentioned, was the manager here at one time. She was one of the first female managers in the state. We had some interim managers, and let me get back to them. Lee Kiner was way before my time, and probably way before most of your time that you'll admit. But Lee worked here, and Lee became a legend. I grew up in Kernersville. Lee was a legend on Channel 2, WFMY TV. He did news. He did interviews. If you had to name the most prominent television personality in Greensboro for probably 20 or 30 years, it was Lee Kiner. Worked well into his senior years, and just a beloved person. Some other people that worked here, Bob Rayford of John Boy and Billy fame, worked here too, and he called it. He wanted a tour one time of this place, and no, that one over there. And I told him he had to get up with Nicole and Roger about that, so I don't know whether he ever did. There were a lot of guys that worked in the news department at WBT in the 60s that got their start on ZKY, and it might have been briefly, but people, Russ Ford in particular, I remember, and Russ may have been in the 50s, Russ Ford and some other people, but they went from here to BT. Rich Pauley, when I first went to broadcast school in Charlotte, I was riding a bus around, which I did in Charlotte. I was, 18, 19 years old. And there's this huge billboard, Rich Pauley, Pauley, WBT afternoons. Rich Pauley, when WBT and Waves were going at it, the big rock and roll in the 1960s or whatever, Rich was a star then. Later in his career, he came back and did the morning show for a while at WZKY. But, he did what he did. But just so you'll know some of the people that worked here. Let's see. As Matt mentioned, there have been some illegal radio stations, and Les Young from Norwood sent me some stuff about a station in Norwood, and somebody also told me about a station up in Northern Stanley County. Back then, you could sort of have an illegal station for a while till the FCC caught you, but you're easy to get caught because there weren't that many radio stations on the air, there weren't that many television stations, there was no cable, there was no satellite. So the FCC could hear you easier because there was nobody blocking you out. Now there's so much media that you could probably do something and not get caught for a pretty good while.
some of our general managers, in addition to Ramel Varner, Rudy Gresham came in after Ramel left. We had sometimes sort of a series of managers, and Rudy Gresham came in, and Keith Allman and them hired him, and he was from Charleston, and Rudy would come up like 3 days a week, maybe 5 days a week if we were unlucky. But usually, and think about Rudy. Rudy was a shock. The first time you met Rudy, you go, whoa, whoa. And the worst thing in the world was have Rudy come in on a Monday morning. But Rudy would call ahead of time, which we greatly appreciated. And Rudy would say, I'm coming in Monday, or I'm coming in Tuesday, or I'm coming in Wednesday. And he would stay usually 3 days, 5 at the outset, but usually, sometimes 2, sometimes he wouldn't be here. But Rudy was pretty much just a caretaker. He wasn't going to do anything. And he was sort of gruff, but you grew to like Rudy after a while. He was funny, and Rudy also did a show. Well, when the general manager of the radio station says he wants to do a show, well then he's going to do a show. So Rudy would do a show, and he was horrible. I mean, and we would sit at our place at night at home or wherever and listen to him. And he would play records on the wrong speed. He'd play the wrong commercial. He's like, here's My Sharona by the Knack. And he'd be playing off an album, and he'd play the cut ahead of or the cut behind it. And one thing you learn, you didn't come into the radio station when Rudy was working. If you wanted to do some work, because every 15 minutes or so, he'd come back and get you and say, somebody wants to hear She Loves You by the Beatles, and I can't find it. Would you help me find it? And it never is. Or he says, I've lost the Confederate Chevrolet commercial. Can you help me find it? And when you walked in, you usually had your carts and the cart racks on the left, and I'll give you some carts made in a minute. And Rudy, instead of putting the carts back in the racks in alphabetical order, Rudy would just stack them up. So you go in there during Rudy's shift, and there'd be 70 carts stacked up in no particular order. And God help you had to follow Rudy, because it'd take you 15 minutes just to find the cart you needed. But, and Rudy used to always say, eating our grits and playing the hits. And now that sounds hokey, but the way Rudy did it, it was funny. And, but Rudy would work when he wanted to, and then if he didn't want to work that night, he'd have a regular guy or gal come in. But Rudy was a trip. Another guy, and some of you may remember, was Jim Martinson. Jim came in and brought his family, and this was one of those good nepotism things. His family were great people. Jim came from Charlotte, where he had been a big executive in Cy Bahakel's group. And some of you older people remember Channel 18 and Cy Bahakel ran that, and maybe some other places. But Jim was like a top broadcast executive and lived in Charlotte, but he came over here and managed, and he would work every day, and he did a great job. And he brought his family. His wife was Louise, and the women called her Weezy, and we just called her Louise or Mrs. Martin. And Martinson, she'd usually be in there. She'd answer the phone and do the logs. Back then, you had paper logs, and you'd have to check off. They'd do like a Confederate Chevrolet commercial, and you check it off that you ran it, or if it had a Confederate Chevrolet commercial and you didn't have a cart for it, then you'd make a note. But you actually had to keep paper logs of the programs you did, the commercials you did, and you maybe send them in when you got your license renewed. You don't do that anymore, but you had to keep paper logs. You had to take meter readings every 30 minutes, supposedly, but nobody ever did that. You just fudged it. But Jim brought his wife. His son, Eric, was our part-time engineer for one time, for a while. And Eric worked at WBT, and they had AM TV, AM FM TV, and they had lots of engineers there, and Eric would work for us. Well, one time, Eric said, I got you, we were having problems with the FM transmitter freezing, like in February. It would be cold. And you turn on the FM transmitter, and you knew it was on. Even somebody that wasn't in broadcasting knew the transmitter was on. You could hear it. But I was trying to remember the sound that it made. But it wasn't good. But it wouldn't broadcast anything. So Eric came in one day and said, I got your cold transmitter problem fixed. And he said, next time it happens, just go up to the transmitter building and use the hairdryer. And we said, what? Well, Eric had installed a hairdryer, and in no battery, you plug it in the wall. And so you go up to the transmitter building when there were problems, and you would use the hairdryer on the transmitter to get it warmed up. I'm not making this up. You go 10 minutes and you go up and down. Now you had a radio up there to see if the transmitter was working right. Because the worst thing you could do is you thought you had it fixed, you come back down here, and then it's gone again. So you would give the transmitter a good 10 minutes of hair dryer. And so then you come back down here. Snakes is another thing, and Matt will cover that. Snakes used to get in the transmitter building because the wires, and Matt has fixed this, or whoever before him, he's got them up off the ground. But it used to be the cables from the transmitters would run through the bottom of the building out a hole, and the hole was big enough to get the cables or the wires through, but also big enough for snakes to get in. And snakes would literally get in the transmitter building and get in the transmitter and get electrocuted. And then you'd have to go up and get the snake out of the transmitter and cut the transmitter back on. So I'm not making that up. So one of the things here, Matt Scott, he did a great job on this research. November 10th, 1979, WABZ AM changed its call letters to WWX. We called it pre-WX. Back then, one of the things in vogue in broadcasting was have WWW whatever, and it was 3W whatever. One of the big stations in Cleveland, Cincinnati, whatever, was 3WE, but we were WWX. The thought was, and there was nothing wrong with this, and this was happening in general all across small stations all across the United States. You had an FM and then you had an AM, and they would simulcast, which is they'd broadcast the same thing on AM and FM. Well, it didn't take a real genius to say, well, you've got two possible streams of revenue, but you're only using one. So you split them off, and you have one programming on the FM and one programming on the AM. And the FM was pop or whatever, and the FM went country, and the FM studio would be like right in there where the preachers used to be. And so that was why the call letters were changed, because they split, instead of ABZ, AM and FM simulcasting, they split them off, and 3WX went country. Stuff. Olden days, and this is predates some of y'all, you get programs on records. They would mail your programs on records, and I got one here, Edward Arnold, which you probably know is Eddie Arnold, and Bob Hope, and then they mail the commercials on records. So I'll just start passing these around, and you can look at them, whatever, just leave them here. And as technology developed, you went from records to sometimes tape. And a lot of guys, I talked with Dee Dee one time, a lot of guys, you had to read all your commercials live, which is great, but it's very exhausting, and why should you read all your commercials live? And then one of the things that went to, and maybe in some step before this, you went to reel-to-reel tape, which is this. And you could record your commercials on tape, and you have to play it and then re-cue it and stuff, but it beat the heck out of reading a commercial live forever. You could record it once on tape. And so, let me pass some of these out, and you'll see some of the old commercial stuff that we have. Okay, you can just pass them around to whoever. And you went to carts, and you had carts, which we had cart machines, and you had carts of like 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 2.5 minutes, 5 minutes. I had one 10-minute cart that I used from time to time. But you had carts, and you put them in a cart machine, and you play them. And so these are carts. Pass these out. There you go. Before I forget Matt, I need not forget Matt. Matt does a lot for our station in particular, because not only does he do the business part, he is very good on internet technology. If you're not online anymore, you can't do business, because a lot of times national companies or even state companies, especially during political campaigns, want to buy programs or commercials. Well, these days they don't send them to you on tape or cassette or CD. They send them to you on the internet. If you're not online, if you don't have a good internet system, you can't get those commercials. Therefore, you can't run them. Therefore, you can't get paid. You have to have good IT stuff. And as Matt mentioned, most of our stuff, and we like to kid people, the station runs better when there's nobody there, because the computer's running. But Matt is great with IT stuff. If we didn't have Matt, we would probably have to hire somebody at least part-time. But Matt saves us a lot of money because he's so good at IT, and he's always inventing different things to make our station sounds better. And plus, if you've ever been to our studio, we have 2 of the biggest computer screens you've ever seen. They're like this big by this big, and everybody comes in and goes, whoa. But that's because of us like me that are difficult to see. But Matt's great on technology. He's also great on engineering. Most of the stations, and even when J.D. Brooks worked here, he did sales. Most of the local stations cannot afford a full-time engineer and really don't need one. They contract with somebody. But Matt is great at engineering. He's learned a lot. And oftentimes, Matt does most of our engineering. And sometimes what he can't handle, he can call an engineer. That we've got Larry Schroep in Charlotte. And Larry can tell him what to do, and he can get that done. But Matt does a great job doing engineering and technology and stuff. There are only 3 people that work full-time at our place over there. Matt, me, and Christy Griffin, who's a full-time salesperson, and we got weekend people like Jim and Dave and some other people. When I worked here at WABC, you had to have somebody on the board all the time by FCC requirements, not only to read the meters, which you didn't do every 30 minutes, but you were supposed to. But there was no automation. You had to have somebody play the commercials, somebody play the records, and we would have 5 or 6 people regular Monday through Friday, and most of us work 6 days, we'd get 1 day off on the weekend. And then you'd have a general manager, you'd have a receptionist, you'd have at least 3 people in the sales department, usually a general manager and somebody, but it took a lot of people to run a radio station back then. Jim Ward was another of our sort of interim managers, and Jim came down here after Jim Markinson, and Jim Ward basically told them that they needed somebody to manage it. We were all in our 20s or early 30s then, and Keith Allman didn't trust us to run the station, and he shouldn't have. But we did fine. We did our job. Like when Rudy wasn't here, or Jim Markson wasn't here, or when Jim Ward, who I'm going to mention, we did fine. We got along fine. The station ran fine. But Jim would come in as an interim manager. He drove from Statesville 2 hours every day, and he came in 4 or 5 days a week. But he basically told him, I'm coming here. I'm not going to do anything. I'll just keep you out of trouble. I'm not going to change anything. And Jim would come in the front door, and he'd ask the reception, he'd say, is everything okay? Yeah. Do you need to tell me anything? No. Are there any problems? No. I'm in my office. And he'd go in his office, and you know, if you needed him, he'd be there. And Jim worked mostly with the salespeople because he didn't work much with us. But we had, when I was here at ABC, we had several interim managers who were here just to keep the thing going, and you know, weren't really interested in doing much. Yes, I think I'm done. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Leon, that was wonderful. It is an honor to work with Leon. We're trying to keep this to about an hour. It looks like it's about 10 after 8. Got a few more things I'm going to run through, so bear with us. And we'll try and stay around too for any questions you might have afterwards. Leon mentioned Bill Norman. I did want to mention him. Of course, we lost Bill in 2012. But Bill, I started working for Bill. He was a very good mentor for me. But one thing I wanted to say about Bill was he changed the landscape of radio in Stanley County, and he really made a mark. Because he came here in 1980, and he took over WZKY at 250 watts. He was competing against the 1,000 watt 1010 station and a 3,000 watt FM station. But he took that, he increased the power, he grew that station, and eventually overtook all the competition. Ended up with all 3 radio stations because he did a great job. He knew how to do radio, and it just really knew what he was doing with radio. So I wanted to say that about Bill. He did a great job. Of course, a mentor of mine in the business. I wanted to mention Ramel Varner because as I come across this, I didn't really know her name prior to getting ready for this. And this is just an article I found of in the paper when she retired. And I wanted to mention her along with Dee Dee Snuggs because in the early days, the stations had a rich history of minorities in prominent places. So I wanted to mention both of those folks. And a couple of stories I want to share. G.C. Wilhoit and Charles Griffin both sent me nice letters. I've never met either one of them, but both of them contacted me. And they have many stories to tell, but there's a couple that I want to tell, and I'm going to read it. I hate to read in a presentation, but I want it to be in their words. G.C. Wilhoit is currently Professor Emeritus of Journalism at Indiana University, and he worked here at WABZ in the 50s. In a story I call A Dedication Gone Wrong, this is how he writes it. One summer afternoon found me quite frazzled, with nothing seeming to go right. A woman called in a dedication to her very ill husband. This next song is by the Blackwood Brothers and is for Mr. So-and-so who is quite ill, I announced. With several records queued for play, I flipped the wrong switch. With the sounds of the quartet's Goodbye, World, Goodbye. He says, humorous now, but not one of my final moments. He also tells this story. I kept the focus on others as I talked on air about the achievements of my high school classmates. I once, quote, broke a significant story on Rock and Roll Party, even scooping the local paper. That was that Peggy Smith, now Greg, had just become the first Albemarle High School girl to win election as president of the Student Council in 1957, running against a very popular male opponent. Phone requests to dedicate songs to her flooded in that day, and I happily obliged. It was interesting to me that he considered this breaking news story a risk when it was such a great story, and Peggy's with us tonight. So I wanted to share that story. Now, Charles Griffin also sent a letter. He worked at WZKY in the early days, about the same time that Woody Durham was there. He sent a letter sharing a lot of memories, and again, not time for all of them. He and Woody Durham attended the Radio TV Institute at Chapel Hill together. I've got a picture of that in a minute. But Charles recounted a memory where WZKY sponsored a hula hoop contest. It created a lot of buzz in the community, and there were a lot of entrants. When the day came, everyone was amazed at the young girl who won, and he said she hula hooped for nearly 4 hours straight. So that was an interesting story from Charles Griffin. And this is a picture that he sent me of he and Woody Durham at the Institute in Chapel Hill. That's Charles Griffin, and that's Woody Durham. And he's holding a record that they all produced at that time, and this is Elmer Ettinger, who was over that at the time. So I do have a few pictures I'm going to run through, and we'll wrap up in a minute. Like Leon said, Woody and Bob, almost synonymous. I found a couple of different pictures of Woody, Bob, and Bill Norman together that I thought I'd share. For those of you who like equipment, this is the WSPC transmitter from the 70s, 80s. This is as it is today. The old WABZ FM transmitter hasn't changed since it was turned off in 2004, but this was it in the 80s, and this was taken about a week ago. It's still sitting out there. Of course, we don't turn it on. This is the WABZ FM on-air studio in the 1980s in this building. And Leon, where was that again?
This is the window there, but again, it's about where Marvin is sitting, looking out.
Okay.
That would be where Marvin's at, looking out.
And you can see, this is the cart rack that Leon was talking about, where they kept them all organized, in most cases. And this is the AM studio in the 1980s, about the same time frame, and it was over here, is that? Yeah, on the other side. A couple of these things are still hanging around. That little shelf right there, we still have. I think I painted it black, but we still use it. And this table is actually something Leon uses every day. These are more pictures of the studios in this building in the 1980s. The AM studio, that's two pictures of it. And this is the lobby. That is against that wall, and this is looking against that wall, if I recall that correctly. This was automation in the 1980s. They had an automation system that took up 3 rack units, a carousel of carts, and some reel reels there. That's all done with one computer these days, but I wanted to show you how big that was. Bill and Susie Norman at WZKY in the 1980s. Some old pictures, but I thought that was interesting. This is the original WZKY building as it was built. Built in 55, went on the air in 56. This is the WZKY on-air studio about sometime in the 70s. This is the WZKY production studio in the 1980s. An auxiliary studio at WZKY in the 80s. Now this, Leon mentioned snakes at the transmitter site. This was taken about 3 weeks ago. I went out to the tower site, and it was looking around at the tower, and I went to the building, I opened the door, and there was some stuff spilled out on the floor that's not normally there, and so I took a step back. I walked in real slowly, and I looked around, and as I was getting ready to walk out of the building, I saw this, and I nearly jumped out of my skin, as the snake had already done. And I didn't see this outside until later, but right here is a piece of conduit that's normally up against the wall, and the snake had evidently come in and wrapped around that and pulled it out away from the wall to get out of its sizable skin there. When I walked outside, this much of that snake skin was hanging outside of the building. So we always have to watch ourselves when we go to the tower. These are just some old consoles that we still have around that were used. This one's early 70s vintage, mid 70s, and mid 80s vintage. But all of these were still in use when we bought the stations in 2004, but have since been retired. This is our WSPC studio as it looks today. It's where Leon sits every morning, does his morning show, Trading Post. This is the WZKY studio as it looks today. We do have a reel-to-reel there, but only because I was trying to dump some stuff off and I needed one hooked up somewhere. This is our production studio today, and these are the very two large monitors Leon was talking about that he likes. This is where we record commercials, do interviews, all that type of stuff in our production studio. The old 250 watt transmitter for WZKY that was retired about 1984 is still there. It still lights up and turns on. We used to use it as a backup, but it won't broadcast anymore. But it still lights up the tubes and looks pretty. So I thought that might be a good picture. This is the current WZKY transmitter and the equipment rack. Now this is the WZKY record library. We still have just about every 45 record that used to be played in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And all of these 33s are, rock and roll. It's all from that time frame. This is our lobby as it looks today. Many of you have been there. Now this, I wanted to share just because it's personal, but it's also interesting history. That's my daughter Serena, about 3 years ago. She's now 3.5. But the bear next to her, after Bill Norman passed away, we were helping the family, and Jeannie Norman, now Schaefer, we were working with them and trying to help them. And one day we got a package in the mail, and it was this bear. And Jeannie said, when I was a baby, my dad got me this bear and put this WZKY shirt on it. And I thought that the next daughter of WZKY should have this bear. And so that was a very touching gesture for me. So I wanted to share that with all of you. So real quick, what does the future hold? Well, we're working on something right now. And next week, we're actually going to hope to make an application, so we can't 100% guarantee anything, but we haven't announced this in public yet. But we're going to make an application with the FCC to get some FM signals. Coming soon, 107.3 FM WSPC and 103.3 FM WZKY. So the FCC is opening up applications again until we get the construction permit. We cannot guarantee, but everything is looking really good. And the FCC will require us to simulcast FM and AM together on those stations, but that's just a kind of teaser for things to come, so be looking out for that. With that wraps it up for us. And Pat,
Can I say a little nauseating thing, but about the history?
Yeah.
I got a few little tales.
okay, Pat, is that okay?
Okay. I'm thrilled. Hey, y'all. But one of the things is my brother-in-law, Larry Thomas, he worked at ZKY and did other things in town. But one night he was signing off, and he walked up to his car to get ready to go home, and he looked up, and the light was out. That light has to burn all the time, so an airplane was good. So he went into the building, got the light out, climbed the tower, and changed the light, came back down. I think I'm about the only one that knows that, because that's not kosher at all. Another thing is Woody Durham. He went to work on a Sunday afternoon, in 1957. He got home from church, and Jake called him on the telephone and wanted to know if he could come over to the station that afternoon. And so Woody went over, and he put him on the air for a little bit, and that's where Woody got his start on a Sunday afternoon. And then after that, during school, he would open the station, and then at night, on summertime, he would work most of the day, all the way through, and then he would do ball games over the Little League at night, and I would be in the outfield or on the bases. Then we would switch around on the second game. Okay, this is the last one. When the station was down in the ABC, down in the bottom over here, one Sunday afternoon, Gangos were down there, and I believe either Jimmy Miller or Jimmy Klutz were the on-air people. I cannot remember which one, but we had a room full of kids, which I probably against the law, but we had it. Well, they had some preacher on, big old record player, talking, and one of either Jimmy or the other Jimmy accidentally hit the arm. I think I better go straight up, came right straight back down. We were 2 minutes off at the end of the show. The guys were sweating, but that's just a little tidbits that I remember growing up here in this great city. I live in Charlotte now, and I wish that you guys could get enough power to bring it to Charlotte.
We're online. Are you online? On the internet?
Yeah, well, yeah, but
You can get us on the
what
internet.
about the car? Okay, I'll listen right now to Gaston.
You got a mobile app? Matt, can he not get you on a mobile app? I see he's got a smartphone. You get us on your smartphone.
Okay. I just wondered because you got the 50s music on.
Yep.
I like it.
The times, Dick.
I was schooled in Stanley County. But, yeah, because Gastonia has a station at the college, and they can come to as far as my house and it stops. But they do the 50s music on Saturdays, and they get a gang of people in and take off all kind of, so that's my story. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. We're just so glad that you were here. And this was an entertaining and educational evening. And just, we'll hope that if there's anyone who is not on our mailing list, you don't want to miss out on our programs, there's a sheet up here where you can sign up, give us your email address so we can let you know about future programs. And that's it for tonight.
Leon and Bob and myself will be around for questions and discussion, because we may have missed something. If we have, please inform us and fill us in. Bob also has copies of his book available and ready to sign them and chat with you, so come by and get a book from Bob. So thank you.